Hey everyone, Codcaster here. It's been a while since I did one of these, but I thought it was finally time to do an Augment build guide for PSO2 New Genesis. The reason why is because it's been about 6 months, so that was like around the STIA region release, and since then there's been so many more augments added, the prices have changed, drop rates have changed, and so much more with these augments. Yeah, going into this, the way that I usually do it is that I base it off the personal shop or the player market and the end meseta cost per capsule for these different augments. With this, I split it up into three different categories. The first one being cheap augments. This is between 1,000 to 10,000 meseta per capsule. This just establishes a baseline to work with for the game. So as you go through the story and get towards the end game, like level 75 right now, this is where you should be at a minimum for your augments. But moving on beyond that, this is where you kind of feel more comfortable with the amount of damage that you're doing. This is the middle of the road. 10,000 to 100,000 meseta per capsule. So it does get a little bit more pricey here depending on the different ones. But once you get here, this is where a lot of people will stop because you don't really need any more beyond that. But then the last category is the expensive 100k plus per capsule for these augments. So this is where you start getting into min-max territory and the augments that take a lot of work to earn, but isn't really necessary, but only for those that really want to push out some more damage. Let's actually get into this though, starting with the cheap augments, and the first one being a stat 4. What I mean by a stat 4 is either the might 4, which gives 3% melee weapon potency, precision 4, which gives 3% ranged, and technique 4, which gives 3% technique weapon potency. For these, you can tell which one that you need based off your weapon type and the colors of their icons. So the melee weapons have like an orange or red, the ranged weapons have a blue, and all technique weapons, like the wand there, have a yellow. And these can be found pretty much like all throughout the game. I know like quite a few of them there, but that's not all of the sources. But this can be found pretty commonly, and in the player market, they should be like around 1,000 meseta. Another good way to get them is through the mission pass, which you can get for free. And basically, just going through that gives you a good amount of these as well. Onto the next capsule, we have a Soul 4. This ranges from a lot of different soul capsules. A few examples here are Dust Soul 4, Crocus Soul 4, and Renus Soul 4. So like these can give a certain substat like HP, photon power, among others, and then give a 3% potency buff that kind of varies for the different weapon types. So technique, ranged, and melee. You just basically have to look out for ones that you want to go for your certain weapons. And these can drop from level 60 plus bosses, certain urgent quests and trigger quests, and among other activities. And for the next augment, we have a Dexta or Noisel note. These can both be found in the STIA combat zones, the Dexta note in the Dex base, and the Noisel note in the Nusen plant. This is towards more of like the later end of the game, but these give a good amount of potency, 2%, and different substat, but they have this negative 10% all down resistance that just like less resistance to the elements, which don't exactly matter in this game too much. But for these, this is probably like the worst capsule on the list, but it's something that's super cheap and really easy to find. It's decent enough to still use. The reason why you would still want to use this as well is because there's categories in this game in terms of augments. So you can't have like two souls on a single piece of gear because they conflict category wise. But yeah, this is a decent capsule to use at a bare minimum. Moving on to the next capsule though, we have a Gigas 3. So these are split up into three different kinds based off the weapon types again. So Gigas Might 3, which gives melee potency plus 2.5% and HP plus 15. The rest of these are basically the same way, just for the other types. But you can obtain these from Gigantics type enemies. These are like the purple glowing ones, either found in the open world or through purple triggers. They have to be at least 39 plus to get the level 3 version. But you can also get them from Recon Gigants, which are very beefed up normal enemies that are roaming around certain exploration zones in Stia and Aleo. They can also be found with Captains, which are the little ball enemies that are rare that show up in trials. Those have to be 39 plus as well. And then Geolab rank 2, you can find them in there. Next, we have the Super Stat 1s. So these are split up into the different potency types and give 2.25% potency. Can only be obtained in Cannonball Rumble and Cannonball Strike, the two modes that are found in the Kavaris region. These can drop in there with the other super capsules. I just find these ones, the better to go for since they have the higher of the potencies. They just don't give any substats. But for these, they just are something if you do those modes. A lot of people aren't doing them anymore. So sometimes these raise up in price into the middle of the road category sometimes. They aren't really worth it if they go that high. Next, though, we have the Duelable 4s. So these are hybrid augments. Melra Duelable 4 gives melee and range 2.75%. Meltech gives melee and tech, and then Raw Tech gives ranged and tech. Yeah, these can be found in various different activities, but the main spots are exploration regions in Stia, item exchange for Stia, which is exchanging the material Infernium for these. It can also be found in the mission pass now. For the last few capsules here, we have the Exploit 1. This one's a little bit more complicated. These can only be obtained during seasonal events, which happen every other month. You can get them to drop from Rappies. You can also get them in the seasonal shop sometimes. But when a seasonal event is not happening, you only get it through the player market when other people sell it. But these are split up into a whole bunch of different types, like Dark Exploit, Fire Exploit, whatever. They are basically just extra potency against enemies that are weak to a certain element type. So if I'm facing dark weak enemies, which are the Starless right now, then I would use the Dark Exploit so I get extra damage against them. But, with these augments, it's only against that certain element. So if you face something with fire when you're using the dark one, it isn't going to do anything for you. This one's a little bit harder to recommend since it's so specific, but it is still nice if you're mainly focusing on that type. There's also exploit 2s, which show up on some weapons by default, which give 4% against the certain element. But these aren't found in any capsule form, but maybe in the future with certain seasonal events. They just haven't happened yet. There's also a couple at the bottom here, which are based off of time. So daytime exploit, which gives extra damage during the day, and nighttime exploit, which gives extra potency at night. I would go for the one that's more like daytime because that takes up like 2/3 of the day versus the nighttime, which is only 1/3 if you can get your hands on. But for the next capsule, we have Dreadkeeper 3. This one's an interesting one because it gives a lot of stats, but not too much in terms of damage. It gives 30 HP, 7 photon power, 2% potency floor, which for those that don't know, that increases your minimum damage, just not the maximum damage that you can do. And then damage resistance plus 2%, or basically be able to take less damage when you're hit. For these, they can be obtained from veteran/dread enemies in exploration zones that are level 30 plus. Can also be dropped from captains, those ball enemies we talked about earlier, that are 30 plus, and then the Geo Lab rank 2 can give them as well. For the last capsule in the cheap category, I put Alt Secreta 4. With this, it has a good positive, but also has some penalties attached. For this, it gives 2.5% potency and also 2.5% potency floor. But it does have some negatives to your defenses, minus 10 HP and minus 1.5% damage resistance. So you could go for this if you're going just the straight DPS route or glass cannon, but if you want to opt out of this, you can. But this can be obtained from altars enemies at nighttime, so the ones that look like this, mutated animals with like the yellow spot on their chest, and then they can be killed either in the Stia combat sectors or in the highest rank Alio sectors right now. But this can also be obtained in the item exchange from Stia, the ones that you get the Infernium for. One note about these is I wasn't sure if I should have kept it in the cheap category because sometimes it does dip above the 10,000 mark into the middle of the road. But I looked at it earlier and it was around like 7,000 to 8,000 meseta, at least on ship 3. So it may be dependent on your ship with the prices. It might be a little bit more expensive or cheaper. And also, when other people are upgrading a lot, it could bump up that price. That was all of the cheap capsules, though. So there they are, all in a list. It's actually a good variety to choose from that are good options. But for an example build that I created here with the Technique weapons, is that we have Technique 4, Nil Soul 4, Alt Secreta 4, Raw Tech Duelable 4, Gigas Technique 3, and Super Technique 1. As you see, there's 6 augments there because that's how much we can get right now. But with this cheap build, you might be only limited to like 5 because you're still at like plus 50 with enhancement or something like that. Because it's pretty expensive to get to that plus 61 mark to get that extra augment slot. But with all of that combined, you get 17.1% potency per armor/weapon that you put all of these on. This isn't 16% because this is all multiplied together. The math is down here. I'm not going to really explain it too much, but basically it equals to that 17.1% potency at the end. If you took all of these though and did it for each of your armor pieces as well as your weapon, then you could get up to 88% potency, which is actually a pretty good baseline for the game. You only had 5 augments though, because this is the cheap build still early on. Then you would be at 72% potency, which is actually a pretty nice minimum to get started with. But that is just the start. Let's move on to the middle of the road augments between 10,000 and 100,000 meseta per capsule. With this, there isn't as many augments as with the cheap category, and as we'll find out later with the expensive ones, it's kind of a hard spot to place. Other augments are really easy to find or really easy to make. They are just ending up in the cheap category, or they're just really hard to make or really rare. They end up in the expensive spot. So not too many lie in this area. Let's start off with the Dreadkeeper 4. This is just a bump up from the 3 that we saw in the cheap category, where it has more of all of the stats that you can get on it. With this, you obtain it from the same kind of enemies, just higher level, 60 plus, and then also found in the Geolab rank 2. This capsule is great for those that want a ton of stats, want to be, tankier because of the damage resistance and HP, but don't care as much with the DPS, but still get something out of it with the minimum damage increase with the potency floor, and also some photon power. Moving on to the next capsule, we have the Trippable 2. This can only be crafted in the Augment Exchange in the item lab. Requires a different number of capsules. 1 for Mito Fuchsia from any of the Phase 1 dual quests, and then 5 of each of the doable Thors that we talked about earlier. This is in the same category as the doables, but just slightly better as it gives 3% potency, and it's just for all potency types instead of just 2 with those hybrid doables over there. Then for the last capsule in this middle of the road category, we have the Stira Domina. It's going to be gotten through a couple of different ways. Be crafted in that Augment Exchange, where you need the Stira notes from the Stia region. There's the zones for A, B, C, and D notes there. Sometimes they're mix and match, where one of these zones gives like a couple of these, but then these notes can also be obtained in the mission pass right now at certain parts of the track. And you also need a couple of minerals, hexakite, and infernium. But then for this Stira Domina to straight up getting it, you can get them in the Geolab rank 2. For the stats on this one, it gives 3% potency for all weapon types. Then it has the -2% all down resistance. This was a previous error with this augment before. It actually gives -2% damage resistance. I believe it does say that now in game. So minus is your defense, not your elemental resistance. And that is all of the augments currently in this category. Stira Domina might sometimes go a little bit above because there's another augment that we'll talk about in the expensive category that requires this. But for a build that you would make out of these capsules, plus the cheap ones, is something like this with the melee type weapon. So you have the Might 4, the Freed Soul 4, Stira Domina, Trippable 2, Gigasmite 3, and Alt Secreta 4. There isn't much of a bump in terms of the potency here because there is just so few of these middle of the road capsules right now, but maybe that will change in the future as more people get those expensive ones that we'll talk about in a second. This bumps you up to 18.25% potency per armor/weapon that you put all of these on for your melee builds, and then all of this combined gets up to 95.5% potency, which is actually really nice, almost to that 100% mark. That one out of the way, let's finally move on to the big guns here, the expensive category. This is where it's going to cost 100k plus meseta per capsule, and sometimes even reaching up to ranges of 10 million per capsule. So it's going to be the pretty penny, but this is where the best of the best augments are, and it just takes a lot of materials to make them, or they're pretty rare. These are for the min-maxers for PSO2. Let's start this one off with the Gigas 4 augment. So these are just the same as the 3s from before. They just give more HP and more potency of their respective type. These were almost into the middle of the road category. Just some of them, when I looked at it, like the Precision 4, were just above the 100,000 mark by a good margin, like 30,000 plus. But for these others, they were just below the 100,000, like in the 90,000. So I just kept in the expensive because some of them were above that. This might dip into the middle of the road later, but I'm not quite sure. These can be obtained from Gigantics just the same, just from level 69 plus ones. These also can be obtained from the Recon Gigants in Stia and Alio sometimes, and then also can be exchanged through the Giga Strugment Exchange, which is a new one that can be found at the item trader, which you get Giga Strugments from these enemies. Moving on to the next capsule, which actually might keep these pricey, is the Gigas Maste. So this can be only crafted in that Augment Exchange. It requires 10 of those Fermito Fuchsias from the Dual Quest Phase 1s, then 10 of each of those Gigas 4 capsules. That's quite a lot. And this just gives 20 HP, so just the same as a Gigas 4, but just a little bit higher potency, and it's an all-potency capsule. Yeah, 3.5% for everything instead of just one type like these right here. So a lot of people just skip on this one because of that high cost, but it does give more damage. For the next capsule, we have the Mastery 4. This is a good all-arounder augment, which gives 2.5% potency, 2.5% potency floor, and 2.5% damage resistance. So good for both DPS and being tanky. But this can be crafted in the Augment Exchange for 10 Mastery 3s, which are from the Captain enemies, then 20 Photon Quartz, and 20 Tetrasite. This can also be gotten straight up from Captains that are level 60 plus, but it's quite rare to get it from them. Also can be obtained from Dual Quest Phase 1s and 2 straight up, but it's just the same situation, or it is rare. These have gotten cheaper for the expensive category. It's only like 200,000 meseta each, even though it is kind of rare to obtain because it's just been available for so long. Next, we have the Fused Trippable. So this is multiple kinds of capsules that you can make in the Augment Exchange that are different from Trippable 2s as they give a substat instead of just the potency. But these require 3 Fermito Fuchsias, that are gotten from those Dual Quest Phase 1s, then 10 of each respective fused stat. So an example here for the Spirit Trippable is that it takes 10 of the Spirit Mites, 10 of the Spirit Precisions, and 10 of the Spirit Techniques. That kind of goes for all of these. So with the Deft here, it takes 10 of each of those Deft ones, and then so on and so forth. But these are all quite different, as the Spirit gives Photon Power, Stamina one gives 15 HP. The Deft one actually has a little bit less potency, but gives potency floor, so it's pretty good DPS, kind of making it a little bit more consistent. And then the Gua Trippable, which I think is the best one here, gives 3% potency and 3% damage resistant. Moving on, we have the Gladia Soul, which is the newest one on this list, which gives 20 HP, 6 photon power, and 3.75% potency, so that's pretty good. But it can only be crafted in the Augment Exchange. It takes 10 Starl Souls, which are only from the new Starless enemy type, 10 Dual Fusions, so this is from the Dual Quest Phase 2 only, and then 30 Arati Soul 4s, which that is from the Dark Falls Interception. So that takes a lot of augments that are kind of time-consuming to get to make just a single capsule, and that's what makes it so expensive, also including that it's just so new. Then we have the High Ale Domina. This is also relatively new, and it gives 10 HP, 4 photon power, 3% potency, and 2% potency floor. Kind of like the Dreadkeeper that we saw earlier, but instead of damage resistance, it gives potency instead, so more of a DPS focus, and just a little bit less in terms of the substat. Yeah, this can be crafted just like other capsules in the Augment Exchange. It takes 30 Ale Sovereigns, which are from the highest rank Aleo combat zones right now, which are level 70, and then 100 Magnus notes from Mount Magnus, 100 Lab notes from Vanford Labs, and then 100 Wrestle notes from Wrestle Forest. This one is a weird one right now, because I don't think this one's going to stay expensive forever. The reason why I say that is because all of those augments that it takes to craft this thing aren't really used in anything else, and they're not good on their own. So I think eventually this is going to tick down as more people make this and more people get it onto their gear. But time will tell, because it's just so many of those augments, even though they are kind of common. Yeah, moving on to the next one, we have the best augment that you can craft in the game right now, Al Finale. This gives you 15 HP, 5 photon power, and 4% potency. That's the highest I can get right now. And this can be crafted with 30 Aegis Soul 4s, which are gotten through the Halfia Lake Urgent Quest, and then 10 Ale Dominas, 10 Retem Dominas, 10 Caveris Dominas, and 10 Stira Dominas. So that's a lot there, but all of those dominants can be gotten through the GeoLab rank 2 or other sources. Then we move on to the last couple of augments here with the expensive category. These are pay-to-win kind of caps. First, we have the Addy capsules, the hybrid ones. So some examples here are Addy Deft Melra, which gives 3% of melee and range potency, and also 2.75% potency floor, which that's really good. And then just like some other ones here, like Gua Meltech, Spiratech, Stamelra, a whole bunch of different ones. but these were obtained from AC scratches or from real money through a support item select scratch. But these particular ones are no longer available, but they are still in the player market, which you can get for a decent price. These augment with 100% chance, which the other augments have like, between 7 to 10% chance to apply. But yeah, these are guaranteed to be put on your gear, and they only cost around like 2 mil or less, depending on which ones that you want to go for. So they're actually one of the cheaper augments to go for in the expensive category because you're spending 2 mil for a guarantee instead of like 200,000, 500,000, 2 mil for just like a 10% chance. But yeah, these are limited in supply because they're no longer sold in those scratches. There's actually a new version of these called the XD capsules. So these are in the same category, so you can have Addies and XDs. Yeah, these are the better version if you want to spend a lot more in meseta or scratch for them with real money. These, I believe, are still currently available, probably not for too much longer at the time that this video will be dropped, but these can give a whole wide range of different damage numbers, substats, whatever. There's the whole wide list right here. But yeah, there's parfait ones, which are generic potency. This gives 4% potency, and the def tier gives 3% potency floor. So that's just a straight increase from those addies. Another example here is the XD Staspimera. This gives 10 HP because of that stamina, 3 photon power because of that spirit, and then because it's Melra instead of Parfait, only for the hybrid here, the melee and the range. And then all of these give some amount of potency floor. This one gives 1.5%. Yeah, all these can also be sold in the player market, so you can obtain them without spending real money. But a lot of these are quite expensive. Like some of these are like 6 mil. This one's like 10 mil, at least on ship 3, maybe even more now. But yeah, this is where the things get really expensive, but they're a little bit better to buy versus, say, like the Hal Finale or the Giga Smash Day, like those, because these are also a guaranteed chance to be put on your gear. That was all of the augments on the expensive category. Quite the long list, but what kind of build can we make that is one of the best in the game right now? It's actually something that isn't even specialized because all of these have all potency on them and not just like specifically melee or something like that. So they have the XD Death Parfait that we just saw with 4% potency, 4% floor, Health Finale with 4%, Gladius Soul with 3.75%, Biggest Mastery with 3.5, High Ale Domino with 3% plus the 2% floor, and then Mastery 4 with 2.5% plus the 2.5% floor. This Mastery could be replaced by something with a higher potency. You'll just miss out on the floor, which it really depends on the class that you're playing if that's better or not. But all of this here added up is 22.6% potency per armor or weapons. That's a pretty big difference from the middle of the road and especially the cheap side. What's all this added up if you had it on every single piece? Well, that is 126% potency. That's like a 30% potency difference, but it's also going to cost you a lot more. This is definitely not necessary to play through the game. Nothing requires even close to this amount of potency. It just helps you complete content way faster, to get meseta faster, or just, doing your own kind of time trials. You want to do something like that. But with this is only through Augment, so you still have the potential on your weapons and your attack power, as well as your bonuses through add-on skills. So this can be a way higher number, so big damage right now. But yeah, this is all of the augments that I would recommend right now in the game, so the cheap, the middle, and the expensive side. So quite a bit of options for you to work with. But yeah, kind of like a DPS route here if you want that real quick. The cheap with the 5 augments there, the middle of the road with the 6, and then the expensive with all of what we just saw. And you could replace the mastery with something like the spirit trippables, like an example that would be pretty good. But then for a tank build, for those that like to do that, I would recommend this kind of setup. So like Dread Keepers are a big focus here. The Mastery is a focus as well. And the supers in the beginning, the super stamina ones, are something that you would want. Yeah, you would focus on like the guards for the different, real money capsules like XD, because that gives you more damage resistance. Just all of those kind of capsules would work. Even the Gua trippable you could replace with one of the 3 down below. hopefully this helps you guys out with all of your augmenting and kind of what to focus on with the game. I have a whole bunch of more resources in terms of augmenting. The Arc's Visiphone website is really good for looking up lists of augments. I also have videos on like how to augment and other things on my YouTube, and I do stream often, so if you have any questions, go check out there. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.